My parents said they were going to be child-free when they got married. Relatives have told me that I got pregnant pretty by chance. At first I had a good life, but I think my parents didn't want to spend as much time with me once I stopped being so cute and beautiful. They both had jobs and a business that they started together. They lived and breathed that business, and I was always second to it. The rest of my family, like my grandparents, lived in different states, and I didn't know much about them until I was an adult. So I didn't have any other family around when I was a kid. I was pretty much raised by TV and my teachers. Before I turned 13, I often didn't spend my birthday with my parents because they would just give me money and tell me to buy whatever I wanted. It was pretty much the same for Christmas, and sometimes even for back-to-school buying. Once I turned 10, I talked my parents into buying a fake Christmas tree that I could put together and then take apart every year. Without it, we wouldn't have had a tree at all. If I had to describe my parents, they're like those people who wear black all the time, drink a lot of wine and frown at other people. And my parents looked and behaved the same the last time I saw them, even though my dad wore a toupee all the time now. I asked my parents if I could work part-time at their business when I turned 16. They told me they didn't have any open jobs or anything like that. They could have told me straight out that they didn't want me there. As soon as I turned 18, my parents told me that I was an adult and should move out as soon as I could. I had a part-time job while I was still in high school. I also didn't have nearly enough saved for college. They told me to pack up and move out not long after high school finished. They got a real notice to vacate that gave me 30 days and everything. They didn't even help me move. I needed help from the truck-owning dad of a friend. I ended up getting a bad apartment and working in stores. I didn't have any skills in real life and didn't have time for college. Then, after only a few months, I was fired because my boss really didn't like me and gave me bad grades for the silliest things. I no longer even remember what they were. The boss didn't just treat me badly though. A few other people and I called company to talk about it. The boss was soon fired for a number of different reasons after being looked into by corporate. I don't know many of them because it was mostly kept quiet. But someone told me that stealing cigarettes was a part of it. The boss also smoked a lot. Corporate wouldn't hire me again, but they would change the record to say I was laid off instead of fired so my resume would still look good. I guess they thought I was broken or something. For some reason, I quickly lost all of my money because I was bad at handling it and couldn't find steady work. I lost my place. When I went back to my parents to ask for help, they wouldn't take me in, not even for a short time to get back up. I lost my job and had to sleep in a tent in someone's backyard during the winter. All of my friends had gone to college, some in different states. I, on the other hand, was broke and doing any job I could find to make ends meet. Someone who lives next door to my parents found out I was living in a tent and offered to take me in for a short time so I wouldn't freeze. She helped me nag my parents until they told me how to get in touch with my cut-off family members. They didn't want to tell me. Maybe they were afraid of being judged for how they threw out their son, but they gave me the information and a list of ways to get in touch with them. Then they told me not to bother them ever again. Friends and family from my dad's side of the family were shocked and delighted to hear from me because they hadn't seen me since I was a baby. I'm the only grandchild they have. When my grandparents heard what was going on, they flew me over to live with them right away. They pretty much adopted me. Even though they were invited, my parents didn't even pick me up at the airport. I didn't talk to them at all for almost 10 years. My grandparents claimed that they hated my parents for how poorly they handled me and formally disowned them by eliminating them from their wills. People who know my parents say they didn't like hearing that. But they also said it didn't matter because they were rich and didn't need anything from my grandparents. It turned out to be so wrong what they said. By the time I was a year old, I had saved enough money to start going to community college. My grandfather helped me get a good job and earn an associate's degree. Eventually, my grandparents offered to sell me their house so they could retire in Arizona. Every year, the cold weather was making her health worse, so my grandmother wanted to move to a warmer place. It made me sad to see them go, but I was glad to buy the house. They gave it to me for a third of what it was worth. It will be paid off in a few more years. Because of my job, I have to go on the road from time to time. That means I might not be able to come home for weeks at a time. This doesn't bother me though. I don't have any pets, a lover, or other things like that. I don't have time for them right now. I'll make time in a few years though, when I have some things in order. I do not want to be single for all time. Then in late 2020, I came home after being away for more than 2 weeks to find a big white van in my yard that I didn't know. When I was about to call the cops, I saw that the van had my parents' business logo on the side of it, and I was scared. Yes, they were there. They got in somehow and were now living in my house. And they were so rude as to greet me like we were old friends as soon as I walked in. They wouldn't leave because it was Grandma and Grandpa's house, even though I told them to. I told them it was no longer their house. When they got old, they sold it to me. If they knew anything about my life, they would have known that. But 10 years ago, they threw me out with the dogs without any life experience. We had a fight, and they wouldn't leave. The first house I heard about was my dad's folks. In other words, he and my mom could live there if they were interested. I went straight to my bedroom, locked the door, and called the cops. The police didn't help when they got there. The truth is that my parents lied to them when they said they had lived there long enough to have residency, but there were no cameras to show that they hadn't been there for a month. My neighbors did not have any cams either. They said they had squatters' rights, so it was my word against theirs about how long they'd really been there. People told the cops that they had a verbal lease with me, and that I was trying to kick them out without a reason. My mom even broke down in tears when she said that. The cops told me it was a family argument, and that I should ask the courts to evict them. This happened in 2020. Because of the outbreak, it took longer to get to court for anything. At the same time, my parents are living in my house without paying rent, and making fun of me. From what they told me, their business failed, and to pay off their bills, they sold almost everything they owned. The van and a few personal items were all they had left behind. In other words, they thought they could live in my house for free for a while. They also had work to do. They both quickly found new jobs. My dad works as a delivery driver, and my mom works in sales. They were making money, and the only things they fixed were the water and power, which meant they just gave me a $100 bill every month, and told me to be thankful they were paying me anything. The only time they would talk about rent was when I took 18 years of their lives. They said I owed them rent-free living. Plus, they weren't asking for the money back at that time. Then they said they would no longer help with the bills. I was so stressed out that I called my grandparents to tell them what was going on. They were very upset and told my parents about it. They said they could stay in my house anyway though, and wouldn't move. Grandpa told me he was sorry this had to happen, and that my parents wouldn't have moved in if they hadn't sold me the house. I told him not to stress out. I had already asked the court to kick them out, and I would soon get it. And my parents knew they didn't have much time left. I made sure that my parents could hear me say that. The way they reacted was to be quiet. Dad was away most of the time, because he drove a delivery truck 6 days a week, a job he didn't really like. And when she had free time, my mom tried to take over my house. After telling me that my parents were my parents and deserved better, she made me move things around in my living room, and even tried to make me give her and my dad the master bedroom. They tried to make me feel like I owed them something, but I told them they didn't deserve better and to stop it. I didn't want to be born. Along with that, parents have a duty to raise their own kids. All they were doing was trying to show who was in charge so I wouldn't kick them out. The last time I took my parents to court was 4 months ago, in early 2021. I did it because they were squatters. We only had to go to court because they fought the removal and tried to trick me into going back on the deal. They tried to get me to move in by saying that it used to be my grandparents' house, and that they were giving me $100 a month, but there wasn't really a rental deal. They knew it would be dishonest to try to make a fake one, so they didn't. The judge told them they had to leave within 30 days at the latest, because they had no right to be in my house. When they saw me after court, they told me they were upset that I had kicked out my own flesh and blood. They were acting like they didn't care about my well-being, so I couldn't help but laugh and call them liars. They didn't love me, so I don't love them either. I didn't owe them anything. They tried to take everything that was mine, but they didn't deserve to be called my parents because they've never really been like that. I sneered at them, told them they were lying narcissists, and told them to take care of their own business. The reason being is that they know I will call the cops if they don't leave my house after 30 days. My dad looked very angry. He tried to say or do something, but my mom stopped him by grabbing his shoulder and shaking her head. He looked down at me and left. They left. Yes, but not without a lot of stress. During that last month, they either tried to change my mind by making me feel bad or ignored me totally. For each day they had to leave, I marked on the calendar in the living room with a red pen. A big red circle showed them exactly which day they were to be out. I still remember that March 2nd was the last day. It wasn't until the day they had to leave my house for good that my parents finally did, even when they had to move all of their stuff out of the house and sleep on the floor in the guest room for a few days. These people were so sure they could get me to let them stay that they didn't even try to find an apartment until after the court eviction. Also, it took my mom weeks of hard work to find a place. They had to settle for a small, bad studio apartment in the next city over, because that was the only thing they could find so quickly. A lot like what I had to do when I was 18. Very strange. I took my mom to see it once, and the place was awful. The walls and rugs were a baby barf green color, and the only window looked out onto a brick wall. There was no dishwasher, the stove was the smallest I'd ever seen, and the toilet looked like it needed to be replaced. It wasn't very quiet inside either, thanks to the walls. While we were there, 2 people were already fighting loudly in the flat next door. My mother did everything she could to give me sad looks and hints that I should feel bad, that I was forcing them to live in such a place. But I pretended I wasn't aware of anything until she stopped. They signed the lease right away and spent the weekend moving in the few things they owned. Finally, they asked for my guest room's queen-size bed, dresser, and flat-screen TV. After they had slept in that room for 5 months, I told them to leave, because I didn't want them in the house anymore. They looked at me like I was treating them like they were sick and didn't want anything else. As soon as they had to leave for good, I changed the locks on all the outside doors. They had spent their last night in my guest room and all of their stuff was at the flat. As they got into the van, they saw me start to take off the old lock on the front door. I didn't say anything, and neither did they. They watched me for a while though, until I put on the new doorknob. After that, they finally left. When that van went down the road, I let out a huge sigh of relief. I thought that their time had finally come, and they didn't need to worry about me. They could live under a rock. Not at all. My folks just heard from them. They called them to brag that they had opened a new business in the same state as me, that was just like their old one. And they're pretty much on track to get their lives back to how they were before the plague, which meant making a lot of money and putting other people down. I looked up their new business on Google already. It looks like it's doing well. They have a lot of good reviews and everything. I have to say I'm pretty damn angry right now. I put them through being homeless, and they squatted at my house for months for almost nothing. Then they went back to being the snobby business people who liked wine they used to be. It's taking way too long if justice is real. Edit. I want to thank everyone for their helpful suggestions. It's becoming clear to me that many of the points being made about selling the house are valid. Their answer was yes, it would be good if I moved closer to them. If I want to sell the house, they told me to go ahead and do it. People who know me will not know where I am if I move out, so I'm really thinking about it now. I'll check with my boss to see if they can move me down south. I don't think I would mind the hot weather anyway. I hate winter ever since I had to sleep in a tent. I'm pretty alone, so I don't have many friends where I am now. It wouldn't be hard to start over somewhere else. I care about this house. I didn't grow up there though, so I'm going to think about moving. I do know that we need more cams, and I will look into that. Those who want to know how my parents broke in and got away with it should look here. Well, it's really stupid easy. They got in through a window I forgot to lock. They opened the door and took off the screen to get in. Then they took copies of my extra house keys, which I kept on a hook near the kitchen. When they told the police they were squatters, and that we had a verbal deal, my parents showed them working house keys, and lied like they were crazy about me letting them move in. Before I even got home, my parents had already changed their address with the DMV online. They showed the cops a printout of the form they had filled out, and told me that their new IDs with my address on them would be sent to me soon. The police just looked mad, and told me it was a family matter, and that I should file to remove them like any other normal person. To report them, I wish I had written down their badge numbers. Just to add on, yes, my parents did have their mail sent to my house. That's another thing they used to say they lived there. The thing is, they would have been renters if they had stayed in my house for more than 30 days with permission. They were there because they said I told them to be, and they used every dirty trick in the book to get the cops to believe them. There was no way for them to say for sure, or not, how long my parents had lived there. A lot of people started to blame each other, and the cops didn't know who to believe. That's why I had to court them out of the house. I wouldn't give my parents the Wi-Fi password while they were living with me though, because they weren't using it. They did get online while they were hiding in my house though, because they used their phones to make a mobile hotspot. People who are telling me I should write bad reviews or talk about my parents' past, there's no point at all. I'm going to be honest and forget about them. On the other hand, if they lied to start their new business, when that comes back on, I'll get some popcorn, because they were going to need help from someone. If you don't believe the 30-day thing with squatters, here it is. If someone lives on your land for more than 30 days with your permission, they become your tenants and can claim rights. This is a direct us law on the subject. When this happens, you will usually have to go through the eviction process. There are still rules you must follow if you break them and live in a house that wasn't occupied even though permission wasn't asked for. They lied about getting permission and how long they'd been in my house. This is why it took 5 months for us to get rid of them. You now know. Update, it's been 5 days now. So I decided to find out more. So I spent 2 days asking my family members how my parents started their new business. They got a new business up and running in less than 2 years after going bankrupt, which is pretty rare. For those who thought it was an MLM, the answer is no. That's something not even my parents would do. Without a doubt, they think MLMs are not for them. The new business my parents are starting is also pretty small compared to the old one. I'd say about half the size. Before they hired at least 2 people. They are the only ones left now. Someone told me to keep an eye on my credit report in case someone steals my name. Since I first had to deal with my parents living in my house without permission, I didn't think anything of them. They knew it too. But to be honest, I doubt they even bothered to remember my legal information from 10 years ago. They might not have even remembered how to spell my first name. I did, however, protect my score. There has been no strange behavior on it at all. At least they didn't try to steal their business money from me. My grandparents on my dad's side, or good grandparents, are the ones who really care about me. They also don't know where my parents got the money to open a new business. They've called them a lot since they told my parents they didn't want my dad's inheritance, but they won't answer because they called a while ago to brag about their new success. It is clear that my parents did not get any help from my dad's family. After that, what about my mom's? I still had that old list of people to call that my parents gave me. That list also had my biological grandmother's landline number on it. I did try to call my maternal grandmother again when I didn't have a house. She didn't care. My mom's parents are a lot like my parents, even though I've never met them. I guess my dad really did find his true love in my mom. Someone else already said it, they were meant to be together. It was possible for me to get in touch with my maternal grandma again. Not only had she been separated from her husband for a long time, but my maternal grandfather has also died. I didn't know that. He died 7 months ago though. He also left my mom a big fortune. That's where they got the money to start doing business again. They made my maternal grandma sound so proud too. She wasn't really interested in talking about much else. It's also likely why my parents called their grandparents to talk about how well things are going for them again. They didn't want to make things better since my grandparents cut them off. But I don't care, and neither do my good grandparents. On my dad's side of the family, everyone tells my parents to go kick rocks. They don't want to have anything to do with them. I'm not the only one whose parents have lost hope. My mom's side of the family is full of divorced people and drunk singletons who hate each other but act nice around each other. People on my dad's side are what I'd call normal and nice. My dad, on the other hand, ruined many relationships. My grandparents were excited to be a part of my life when I was born, but my parents kept me away from them for some reason. I'm not sure why they did what they did. I think it's because they didn't want to be judged on how they raised their kids. I would have liked it better if they had sent me to private school, or to live with my grandparents. Narcs aren't really happy if they don't have someone to put down though. You have no idea what they've said about me behind my back all these years. To start a new business, my parents didn't do anything wrong, it looks like. Not much that can be told to the IRS or someone else. There is no rule that says you can't use money from an inheritance to start your own business. Like me, my mom was an only child. When her dad died, she got everything, such as his house and land. That's where my parents live now. I saw a picture that my maternal grandma sent me. The house isn't very nice. Not bad though. About the same as mine, I'd say. My parents now have a place to live without having to pay for it, so they probably won't have to bother me again. I want to move and sell my house. It turns out though, that the company I work for doesn't have an office in Arizona. So I either quit and look for work in Arizona after selling my house, or I don't. I could also stay put and hope my parents don't bother me. It's on my mind to look for work because I don't want my parents to ever find me again. If it's not possible, I won't move. I'd rather be able to though. So what if I want to sell the house quickly? There's no point in getting more cameras for it. However, if I can't find another job in Arizona in the next few months, and have to stay here, I might as well put cams inside and outside. A lot of people have told me good things about what cameras to buy and where to put them. I don't think the same thing will ever happen again. But I don't want my parents to ever try to find me again, for any reason. I won't care if they need help when they're old. They won't get anything back for what they gave. For all time, they're dead to me. The people on my dad's side of the family also agree. I will do everything I can to never become like my parents if I ever become a parent or step-parent. That's not fair for kids.